Welcome everyone to another week of Professor Whoopie's Bible Stories. We are concluding in our series of Faith Over Fear. Today, I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. Kids, today's our adventure takes us to the countryside of where Jesus' ministry begins. We'll be looking at Simon, who later was called Peter. Did you know that Peter was fearful of many things? Well kids, this is Rosie and I am going to let Professor Whoopie come in just a moment and give you the introduction to our exciting story today. Kids, it is time for me to go, so you all next week. Bye-bye.
Hello everyone! I am Professor Whoopie and I'm here to whoopie up a big one for you today. That's right. Hey, we've been talking about faith over fear for the last 3 weeks. And today we will wrap up our mini-series with the story of Simon, who later was named Peter by Jesus. Now, for the sake of no confusion, we will call him Peter. That way we're not back and forth with Simon, Peter, Simon, Peter, Simon, Peter, Simon, Simon, Peter. Hey, anyways, the Bible tells us that Peter was a fisherman. He was also a follower of John the Baptist, which ultimately created the opportunity for Jesus to choose him as an early disciple or follower of Jesus. Now, Peter was a rugged man, and many times before thinking things through, he spoke his mind and stuck his foot into his mouth. Ha! I know none of you out there have ever done that, right? Ha ha! Yes, I thought so. Well, I see those faces, so we can assume that many of you have done the same thing. Well, Peter, several times in his life, he found himself filled with great, terrifying fear. And when we come back, we will talk about those times. See you in just a few moments. Here we go!
My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. In the beginning, God made everything. God simply spoke and the world came to be. He sent a flood and made everything new. He parted the sea and let his people walk through. He helped a boy bring a giant right down. Joshua marched, the walls fell to the ground. These acts of power are worthy of praise. But if you want to question my God and his ways, I'll look you in the eye and say, my God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. Though we are sinners, he still gave us worth. God sent his son to live here on the earth. He healed the sick, he made blind men see. He let the lame walk and he set the world free. He died on a cross and he rose from the grave. He conquered sin, he is mighty to save. He went to heaven and he's coming back. God's word is true, but if it's attacked, I'll look you in the eye and say, my God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. God the Spirit, God the Father, God the Son. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. God the Spirit, God the Father, God the Son. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. I want the world to know about my God. I wanna live so the changed, I'm forgiven and new. If people need proof, may they see it in me. Let's look the world in the eye. Let's look them in the eye and say, my God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. I'm not afraid because God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do.
Simon was a man known for putting his foot in his mouth, but one thing that could be said about him is that when he was told go, he went. Immediately, he became a faithful follower of Jesus. In fact, he was the first to call him the Son of the living God, the Messiah. He knew from the get-go that Jesus was God. Jesus renamed Simon the fisherman to Peter the Rock. Not exactly Dwayne Johnson. This rock would later become the God-ordained foundation of the church. He walked with a bold assuredness of Jesus' identity. Whether good or bad, he was often the spokesman for the disciples, and sometimes he was boldly wrong, even rebuking the almighty creator of the universe to his face at one point. But you gotta give him points for confidence. In fact, the chest-puffed-out confidence continued with him the whole time he walked alongside Jesus, right up to the very end. Then something changed. Jesus had this bad habit of talking a lot about death, his death to be exact, and the disciples didn't like it. But they listened, and Peter listened as Jesus told him that he would disown this man he so faithfully followed, not just once, but 3 times. 3 times before the rooster crowed. Bold, proud, Peter wouldn't hear of it. Nope, not this man that he left everything back on the shore to follow just 3 years earlier. Never. And yet, this confident man cowered in fear at the midst of Jesus' arrest and trial. Hey, weren't you with Jesus? No, not me. I'm sure I've seen you with that Nazarene. Not a chance, I don't even know the guy. No, really, you're one of them. You're one of his followers. Come on, I've never even met him. And just like that, in the amount of time it took for a rooster to crow, this cocky, arrogant fisherman became a truly humble, obedient servant of the Savior. In his humility, in his weakness, is where he found the strength to become the rock the Messiah ordained him to be. Peter, the Rock.
We are back, and so on with today's lesson on Peter. First, we find both Peter and his brother Andrew down by the sea in their boat, and Jesus, as he was passing by, calls out to them and says, "Follow me." And the Bible tells us that they immediately left behind everything and followed Jesus. In Luke chapter 5 and verses 1 through 11, it gives us the description of Peter and the fact that he was awestruck, and his brother Andrew, they left their fathers and their ships and dropped everything to follow Christ. There's a lot that can be said about Peter, but since our time is short, I have chosen to concentrate on a few things about when he feared and how he overcame it. The first one is when they were out on the Sea of Galilee. In the middle of the night, a storm came up and Jesus wasn't with them. And these men who were more than able to handle themselves were all terrified, and they feared for their lives. They all thought they were going to die. You see, Jewish tradition speaks that when you see a spirit walking and coming toward you, which is what they saw, but they did not know it was Jesus who was walking toward them. it meant that they would die. But all of a sudden, we find where the voice cries out and says, "Hey, do not fear, it's me." And as the figure was getting close, we find in Matthew chapter 14, verses 27 and 29, it says, "But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid.' And Peter said, 'Lord, if it's you,' Peter replied, 'tell me to come to you on the water.' And verse 29, 'Come,' he said. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water, came toward Jesus. And then all of a sudden, Peter, realizing what he had done, filled up with fear. And in verses 30 through 33, it says, 'But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand, caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Whoa! Well, the next one then is when Peter was warming his hands by the fire after Jesus was arrested, and a man and a peasant girl and others who were there recognized Peter as one who was following Jesus. The Bible in Matthew chapter 14, verses 67, the last part of that verse to verse 72, it says, "You also were with the Nazarene Jesus," she said. But he denied it. "I don't know or understand what you are talking about," he said. And he went out into the entryway. And when the servant girl saw him there, she again, to those standing around, "This fellow is one of them." And again he denied it. And after a little while, those standing near Peter said to him, "Surely you are one of the Galileans." And he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." And immediately in verse 72 it says, "The rooster crowed the second time, and then Peter remembered the words of Jesus had spoken to him, 'Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and he wept. Peter was so remorseful, and to think that God would ever want to use him again. Oh! Well, we're going to take a quick break, and I have a little friend of mine who's going to come and say a good word. And we'll be back in just a few. Hello, everybody. This is Elastic Man, and I'm glad to be with you. Professor Whoopie asked me to come in and just kind of do a final wrap-up of everything that we've looked at on our subject for this month. So let me just start by saying this. You know, we live in uncertain times today when there's a lot of things going on in our society. There's a lot of changes going on than what we've ever had before, things that are scary. But at the same time, you know, it's just like our lessons that we've been looking at. People that have put their faith over fear, and when they did, God did some awesome things in their life. And it's just like us today. We may be fearful about a lot of things, but if we put God first in everything we do, faith over fear will overcome anything. Period. There's no more that I could say other than we have got to be able to trust God and know that He has it in control. And we're back. Thank you, Mr. Elastic Man. That was a good word. All right, so we are going to fast forward from the time that Peter was remorseful now to the resurrection of Jesus, when the gals came and told the disciples of Jesus' resurrection. They said that Jesus said to tell Peter that he's alive. So both Peter and John were the first two that were at the tomb, and Peter went in ahead of him. And later on, after a few days, when Jesus appeared to them by the sea one morning, and let Peter know that he was forgiven. When Jesus said, "You are Peter," which means rock, Jesus said, "Because of your confession, I will build my church." And if Jesus can take a fearful man like Peter and turn him into the rock for Christ, how much more can Jesus do the same with you, boys and girls, and kids and kiddos and grandmas and grandpas? Yeah, God can do something with you old people too. Ha ha ha! Yeah, don't be laughing now. Okay? And mummies and daddies. Now think about it. Without God, we are just humans lost in sin. But when Jesus calls us and picks us up, he transforms us, he cleans us, he sets us on a path to eternal glory in Christ Jesus. No longer do we have to live in fear, but we can live in faith that God has everything under control. You know why? Because he does. Ha ha! I knew it. I knew you were going to go, "Oh yeah, sure. But it's true. It is because he does. Well, everybody, this is Professor Whoopie, and I am glad that we had this time today and in this series. And I'll tell you what, we are going to say goodbye. We are going to say Avidase, Arrivederci, Harubaboo. I forgot to say that the last couple of times. Can you believe that? That's my signature. Harubaboo. Now you figure out how to spell it, okay? Anyways, until next time, bye-bye. Oh. This has been an OJO production. Thank you very much.